Hi, welcome to Unit 4, Day 1, Review Part 1. We're going to review types and properties of elements. Okay, so before school closed, one of the things that we looked at in Unit 3 is the arrangement of the periodic table and how we can use the periodic table to determine the type of element that we have. So when I say type of element, there are three types of elements: metals, nonmetals, and metalloids, also known as semi-metals. And in this periodic table, they're color-coded, so that's pretty easy to see. The metals are color-coded in blue, and as you can see, most of them are on the left-hand side. The nonmetals are color-coded in yellow, and most are on the right-hand side, with the exception of hydrogen, which is over here in group 1, but it is a nonmetal. And then you have the metalloids or semi-metals, which are between the metals and nonmetals, and they're on this what's called a zigzag line that sort of runs down the periodic table. So the key thing is that if you know where an element is in the periodic table, you can determine what type of element it is. Now, before we go any further, there's some things that I want you to remember in terms of how we describe the periodic table. So we describe the periodic table, how it structures in terms of using the terms groups and periods. So groups, which are shown over here on the upper left, those are our vertical columns. So first column will be group 1, second will be group 2. In the middle here, we have what's called the transition metals. Those are group 3 through 12. And then at the end, we have groups 13 through 18. To describe the rows or horizontal rows, we use the term period. So the first row running across would be period 1, second row period 2, third row period 3, etc. So make sure you remember that we do use those terms groups and periods. Okay. Also, this is something that we kind of touched upon just a little bit. I think you took an extra ticket on this, but there are 5 families, and we'll be using the terms to describe these families, so it's important to know these families. The first family is the alkali metals. The alkali metals are in group 1, so starting with lithium on down. Now remember, hydrogen is also in group 1, but it's not a metal, so it's not an alkali metal. The second group or family is the alkaline earth metals. So these two kind of look alike, but notice that for group 2, it has 2 words. So alkaline earth metals. So that starts with beryllium on down. In the middle here, which we also call the D blocks, that rectangular bit there, those are known as transition metals. And then finally, let's look at the 2 nonmetals that we need to know. Group 17, which starts with fluorine, those are known as halogens. And then group 18 are our noble gases. So it's important that you know these family groups. Now you can find information about these family groups along with the properties of metals, nonmetals, and metalloids in your Unit 3 Day 1 notes. Unit 3 Day 1 notes can be accessed in this folder. They're also in the Unit 3 notes folder as well, if you would like to access them there. Okay, so let's take a moment to do a couple of CFUs to see if we understand how we can use the periodic table to determine something is metal, non-metal, or semi-metal. All right, the first example is the element in group 14, period 2 is what? Is it a metal, non-metal, or semi-metal? So to help you off with that, just remember for groups, we have to count the columns. So we would start here, group 1, 2, and then keep counting till we get to group 14. And then the period, we would count the rows. So remember, we start at the top. This is period 1. Then going across here will be period 2. So pause the video now. When you press play again, the answer will be revealed. Great. So if the answer is a nonmetal, so group 14, period 2 corresponds to carbon, and that is a nonmetal. Same thing for CFU 2. This time it's group 1, period 4. Is it a metal, nonmetal, or semi-metal? Pause the video, and when you press play again, the answer will be revealed. Great, so that corresponds to potassium, which is a metal. Next question, describing where you would find the element in the periodic table. Where would you find metals, nonmetals, and semi-metals or metalloids? You can use terms like left side or right side, between or on the zigzag. Pause the video, and when you press play again, the answer will be revealed. So typically the metals are found on the left side, or the metals are found on the left side, and the nonmetals are found on the right side. And the metalloids are found in between the metals and nonmetals along what's called that zigzag line. Okay, finally, most elements in the periodic table are what type of element? Metal, nonmetal, or semi-metal? Okay, answer to that are metals. Most elements are metals. All right, so with that being said, now we're going to talk about properties. But before we do, let's go into like, why do scientists want to even know what type of element we have? And that actually has to do with the properties. Key thing is that different types of elements have different properties. And when I say properties, I mean characteristics. So if you know a type of element, you can predict its properties. And by knowing its properties, you can get a better sense of what it's used for. So let's take an example with metal. Metals are used to make jewelry because one of their properties is that they are malleable, meaning that they're bendable. All right, let's take that a little bit further through a CFU. So some metals are often used to make electrical wires, like copper, for example. Which property of metals makes them useful in electrical wires? So here are 4 choices. They're insulators, many are good conductors, they are hard, they are dense. Pause the video now. When you press play again, the answer will be revealed. Great, the answer is that many metals are good conductors. So if they can conduct electricity, that's what makes them useful to be used in electrical wires. Now, you may remember that we sort of touched upon that and saw that in our metals versus nonmetals lab, the properties of metals, like for example, that they're malleable, you can bend them, and that many of them conduct. So in that lab, you tested the property of 10 elements. You looked at metals like copper, tin, lead, and zinc. Non-metals like sulfur and carbon. Remember, sulfur was like the yellow one that kind of stank like eggs, and then carbon was that like charcoaly type one. And then we looked at one metalloid, which is silicon. And you tested them for their color, texture, their luster, was it shiny or dull, whether their malleability, so were they malleable, could you bend them, or whether they brittle, did they break? Conductivity, whether they were a conductor or insulator, and if they reacted with acid. So let's just take a look at test your memory of those properties. So this CFU will be used to test your memories. So which of the following are typical metallic properties? What you're going to do is you're going to just go through and then check off all the ones that are properties or characteristics of metals. So their phases, what kind of phase are metals typically? Are they shiny or dull, malleable or brittle, etc. When you press play again, the answer will be revealed. Okay, so metals are typically solid. They're typically shiny. Most of them, they're malleable. They bend. Many are good conductors. Not all, but many are good conductors. And they typically have high melting points. Not all, but many have high melting points. All right, you're going to try the same thing now with the properties of nonmetals. So pause the video now. When you press play again, the answer will be revealed. So nonmetals, many of them are gases, and in fact, there's a slight majority of them that are gases, but there are also many solids as well. And you can see that in the images. We have gases here, and then we have some solids, right? In terms of solids, they're dull. So for example, if you look at sulfur or carbon, they're very dull. Now you may look at this and think, oh, that's shiny, it's diamond. It's not really shiny. Shiny means light is reflected off of it. This is just light passing through. So that's not shiny, it's actually dull. In terms of their malleability, if you hit the nonmetal, it will break, it's brittle. They are insulators, they do not conduct electricity, and they typically have low to medium melting points. So one thing you may notice is that if you compare the metals and nonmetals, they have opposite properties. For example, metals are shiny and nonmetals are dull. Metals are typically good conductors and nonmetals are insulators. So one thing to know is that their properties are opposite. And that will be something that will come more into light in this unit, Unit 4. So, quick summary, what we've done so far is that we've gone over that you can tell what type of element you have based on where it is in the periodic table, and different types of elements have different properties, and we can predict those properties if we know the element. Now, the things that you must know for this unit, you must be able to look at a periodic table and determine if it's a metal element is a metal or non-metal. We don't really deal so much with metalloids here, and when we do, we treat them as non-metals in this unit. But you do definitely need to know if something is a metal or non-metal. You also need to know the key families because we'll be using those words like alkali metals, noble gases, etc. And then finally, you need to know the properties of metals and nonmetals. So these are the things that you need to know for Unit 4. That's it for Part 1 review.